When your child snaps back at you with, "I don't care," or "You can't make me," you feel that instant surge of frustration mixed with hurt, and your first instinct is probably to figure out what you did wrong as a parent. But what if I told you the real reasons kids talk back have almost nothing to do with your parenting, and everything to do with forces you probably haven't even considered? There are hidden developmental, neurological, and even social factors driving this behavior, and once you understand them, everything changes. Now, before we dive in, I want you to know something. If your child talks back, it doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean they're destined to be disrespectful adults. And it definitely doesn't mean you need to completely overhaul your parenting approach. What it means is that something deeper is happening, something beneath the surface that's driving the behavior. And when you understand what that something is, you can finally address the root cause instead of just battling the symptoms over and over again. Here's what most parenting advice gets wrong. It focuses entirely on how to respond to back talk, what consequences to give, what words to use, how to set boundaries. And all of that matters, don't get me wrong. But if you don't understand why the back talk is happening in the first place, you're essentially trying to bail water out of a boat without plugging the leak. You might make temporary progress, but the problem keeps coming back. So let's talk about what's really going on. Let's talk about the hidden reasons kids talk back, the ones that have nothing to do with whether you're too strict or too lenient, whether you've given them too much screen time or not enough consequences. These are the factors operating beneath the surface, invisible to most parents but absolutely critical to understand. The first hidden reason is developmental. And this one surprises parents because we tend to think of back talk as a behavior problem, a respect problem, but it's actually a developmental stage. Between the ages of about 6 and 12, and then again during adolescence, your child's brain is going through massive changes. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and thinking before speaking, is under construction. It's literally being rewired. And during this construction phase, your child's ability to manage their emotional responses is compromised. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to navigate a building while the walls are being moved, the floors are being refinished, and the electrical system is being rewired. That's what your child's brain is doing. They're trying to regulate their emotions and control their impulses while the very systems responsible for those functions are being rebuilt. So when your 9-year-old hears the word no and immediately responds with, "That's so unfair," they're not necessarily choosing to be disrespectful. Their brain literally doesn't have the same capacity for emotional regulation that yours does. Now, I know what you're thinking, but that sounds like an excuse. Are you saying I should just accept back talk because their brain isn't fully developed? Absolutely not. But understanding this developmental reality changes how you respond. It means you're not taking the back talk as personally. You're not interpreting it as evidence that you failed to teach them respect. You're recognizing it as a predictable developmental challenge that requires patient, consistent guidance, not moral panic. Here's the second hidden reason, and this one is even less obvious. Your child talks back because they're practicing autonomy. And I know that sounds like psychology jargon, so let me break it down. As children grow, they have a biological drive to become independent. This isn't rebellion. This isn't them trying to make your life difficult. It's a healthy, necessary developmental process. They need to learn how to have their own thoughts, make their own decisions, and advocate for themselves. The problem is, they don't know how to do that skillfully yet. So what comes out is clumsy, messy, and often disrespectful. When your child says, "You never let me do anything," they're actually trying to express something legitimate. They're trying to say, "I want more independence," or "I feel controlled," or "I'm frustrated that I can't make this decision." But they don't have the emotional vocabulary or the communication skills to say it that way. So it comes out as back talk. It comes out as attitude. It comes out in a way that makes you want to shut down the conversation entirely. But here's what's important. If you only respond to the delivery, if you only address the tone and the disrespect, you miss the underlying need. And that need doesn't go away. It just gets expressed in more and more problematic ways. This is why some kids who are heavily punished for back talk don't become more respectful. They become sneaky. They learn to hide their feelings, to say what parents want to hear, and then do what they want behind the scenes. The need for autonomy doesn't disappear just because you've successfully suppressed its expression. The third hidden reason is actually about power, but not in the way you think. Kids don't talk back because they want to dominate you or because they're trying to take over the household. They talk back because they feel powerless. And this is crucial to understand. Think about your child's daily experience. From the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed, almost every aspect of their life is controlled by someone else. What they eat, when they eat it, what they wear, where they go, who they spend time with, how they spend their time. Even things that feel like choices, like do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt, are still operating within boundaries that adults have set. Now, most of the time, kids accept this. They understand on some level that adults need to be in charge. But every human being, including children, has a fundamental need to feel like they have some control over their own life. And when that need isn't met in healthy ways, it comes out in unhealthy ways. Backtalk becomes one of the few areas where your child feels like they have power. They can't control what's for dinner, but they can control whether they respond respectfully or defiantly. They can't control their bedtime, but they can control the tone they use when you announce it's time for bed. This is why backtalk often increases during transitions or times of stress. When your child is starting a new school, when there's conflict in the family, when they're struggling academically or socially, the backtalk gets worse. It's not because they're trying to make a hard time harder. It's because they're feeling even more powerless than usual, and backtalk is one of the only ways they know how to reclaim some sense of control. Here's the fourth hidden reason, and this one is about emotional capacity. Your child talks back because they're emotionally overwhelmed and they don't have the skills to communicate that. Think about the last time you were really stressed, really overwhelmed, really at the end of your rope. Maybe it was a hard day at work, maybe you were dealing with a family crisis, maybe you were just exhausted. And then someone asked you to do something totally reasonable, and you snapped at them. You weren't trying to be rude. You weren't trying to hurt their feelings. You just didn't have the emotional bandwidth to respond gracefully. That's what's happening with your child, except it's happening way more often because they have way less emotional capacity than you do. Their stress bucket is smaller, it fills up faster, and it overflows more easily. So when you ask them to clean their room or turn off the TV or come to dinner, and they respond with attitude, it's often not about the request itself. It's about the fact that their emotional bucket is already full. Maybe they had a hard day at school. Maybe they're worried about a friendship. Maybe they're tired or hungry or feeling insecure about something they can't even articulate. And because they don't have the self-awareness or the communication skills to say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now and I need a minute, it comes out as, why do I have to do everything around here? They're not actually complaining about the chore. They're expressing emotional overwhelm in the only way they know how. And when we respond to the words instead of the feeling underneath, we miss the real issue entirely. The fifth hidden reason is social. And this one catches parents completely off guard because it has nothing to do with what's happening in your home. Your child talks back because they're learning communication patterns from their peers, from media, from the broader culture they're immersed in. Think about the shows and movies that kids watch. The cool characters, the funny characters, the ones kids want to emulate, they're often sarcastic. They roll their eyes at authority figures. They deliver witty comebacks. They talk back, and it's portrayed as clever, as confident, as entertaining. Now add in what they're seeing from peers. Maybe there's a kid at school who talks back to teachers and gets laughs. Maybe their friends use sarcasm as a primary form of humor. Maybe the social currency in their peer group is built on who can deliver the best comeback, the sharpest retort. Your child isn't sitting down and consciously deciding to adopt these patterns. They're absorbing them. They're internalizing them as normal ways of communicating. And here's what makes this particularly tricky. From your child's perspective, they might not even register what they're doing as disrespectful. Everyone around them communicates with sarcasm and attitude. If that's the water they're swimming in, they genuinely might not understand why you're upset when they do the same thing at home. This is why you'll sometimes see your child look genuinely confused when you call out their tone. They're not playing dumb. They literally don't hear what you're hearing because their reference point for normal communication is different from yours. The sixth hidden reason is about emotional literacy, or rather, the lack of it. Most kids have never been taught how to identify, name, and express their emotions in healthy ways. They feel something big and uncomfortable in their body, frustration or disappointment or anger or fear, and they don't have the vocabulary or the framework to understand what they're feeling, let alone communicate it. So it comes out sideways. It comes out as attitude, as back talk, as defiance. Imagine if you felt nauseous but you didn't know the word nauseous, you didn't understand what nausea was, you just knew your stomach felt weird and bad. You'd probably communicate that discomfort in confusing or ineffective ways. That's what kids are doing with emotions. They feel something, it's uncomfortable, and back talk becomes the outlet. They're not trying to be difficult. They're trying to express something they don't have the tools to express properly. And here's what's important. Most parents, even really good parents, don't explicitly teach emotional literacy. We assume kids will pick it up. We assume they'll learn it through osmosis. But they don't. It has to be taught, practiced, modeled, reinforced over and over again. And until it is, back talk remains one of the primary ways kids communicate emotional discomfort. The seventh hidden reason is about attachment and connection. And this one is going to sound backwards at first, but stay with me. Sometimes kids talk back more when they feel disconnected from you. Not because they don't love you, not because they're trying to push you away, but because negative attention is still attention. And if a child isn't getting enough positive connection, if they're feeling emotionally distant from their parent, even negative interactions start to feel better than nothing. Think about it from their perspective. If you've been busy, stressed, distracted, if you've been physically present but emotionally unavailable, your child might unconsciously start acting out just to get you to really see them, really engage with them. And back talk is incredibly effective at getting a reaction. It guarantees your full attention, even if that attention is negative. This is why you'll sometimes notice back talk increasing during periods when you've been particularly busy or stressed. It's not that your child is trying to make your life harder. It's that they're trying to reconnect with you in the only way they know how. The eighth hidden reason is about modeling. And this is the one that makes parents the most uncomfortable because it requires us to look at our own behavior. Kids learn communication patterns from us. If we're sarcastic, they become sarcastic. If we're dismissive, they become dismissive. If we interrupt, they interrupt. If we use a certain tone when we're frustrated, they adopt that same tone. They're not doing this consciously. They're not sitting there thinking, I'm going to copy mom's attitude. They're absorbing our patterns and replaying them. And here's what makes this particularly challenging. We often don't hear our own tone the way others hear it. We think we're being reasonable, but our child hears frustration. We think we're being clear, but our child hears dismissiveness. We think we're being calm, but our child picks up on the tension in our voice. So when they mirror that back to us, when they use the same tone or the same phrases, we're offended. We think, I would never talk that way. But from their perspective, they're just communicating the way they've learned to communicate from watching us. This doesn't mean you're a bad parent. It doesn't mean you need to be perfect. But it does mean that if you want to change your child's communication patterns, you have to be willing to examine and potentially change your own. You have to model the respectful, calm communication you want to see from them, even when you're frustrated, even when you're tired, even when they're pushing every button you have. The ninth hidden reason is about fairness and justice. Kids have a highly developed sense of fairness, sometimes even more acute than adults. And when they perceive something as unfair, when they feel like they're being treated unjustly, the back talk intensifies. Now their perception of fairness might not match yours. They might think it's unfair that they have a bedtime when you don't, that they have to do chores, that they can't have dessert before dinner. From an adult perspective, these things aren't unfair at all. They're just part of being a kid. But from their perspective, the injustice feels real. And when people feel like they're being treated unfairly, they resist. They push back. They argue. It's a human response, not a kid response. Adults do the same thing. We just have more sophisticated ways of expressing it. So when your child says that's not fair, they're not necessarily being bratty or entitled. They're expressing a genuine feeling of injustice. And if we only shut down the expression without acknowledging the feeling, we miss an opportunity to teach them how to navigate feelings of unfairness in productive ways. The 10th hidden reason, and this is the last one, is about temperament. Some kids are just wired to be more intense, more reactive, more emotionally expressive. This isn't a character flaw. It's not a parenting failure. It's temperament. It's the way their nervous system is built. These kids feel everything more intensely. Joy is bigger, sadness is deeper, frustration is more overwhelming. And when they feel something intensely, they express it intensely. If you have a child with this temperament, back talk isn't about disrespect. It's about intensity. It's about a nervous system that runs hot, that reacts quickly, that feels deeply. These kids need more support with emotional regulation. They need more patience. They need more practice with calming strategies. But they're not bad kids. They're not disrespectful kids. They're intense kids. And intensity, when channeled properly, becomes passion, becomes advocacy, becomes leadership. But it takes time, guidance, and a whole lot of understanding. So here's what all of this means for you. When your child talks back, before you react, before you launch into consequences or lectures, pause and ask yourself what might really be going on. Is this developmental? Are they practicing autonomy? Are they feeling powerless? Are they emotionally overwhelmed? Are they copying patterns they're seeing elsewhere? Are they lacking emotional vocabulary? Are they seeking connection? Are they mirroring my communication style? Are they feeling treated unfairly? Or is this just their temperament showing up? Most of the time, it's a combination of several of these factors. And when you can identify what's really driving the behavior, you can respond in a way that actually addresses the root cause. You can teach them better communication skills. You can give them appropriate autonomy. You can help them build emotional literacy. You can strengthen your connection. You can model better patterns. You can validate their feelings while still maintaining boundaries. This doesn't mean you accept disrespect. It doesn't mean back talk gets a free pass. but it means you're responding with understanding instead of just reacting with frustration. You're addressing the why, not just the what, and that changes everything. Because when you address the root cause, the behavior actually changes. Not just temporarily, not just when you're watching, but genuinely, sustainably changes. Now here's what happens when you start approaching back talk this way. First, your own frustration decreases, because you're not taking it personally anymore. You're not interpreting every eye roll as evidence that you're failing as a parent. You're seeing it for what it really is, a child who's struggling with something and doesn't have the skills to express it properly yet. And that shift in perspective, that alone makes the whole dynamic less charged, less emotional, less exhausting. Second, your child start to feel more understood. Even if you're still setting the same boundaries, even if the answer is still no, when they sense that you get what's really going on, that you're not just reacting to their tone, but actually trying to understand them, something shifts. The resistance decreases, the defensiveness softens, they become more willing to work with you instead of against you. Third, you can start teaching them the skills they actually need. If the problem is emotional vocabulary, you can teach them feeling words. If the problem is autonomy, you can create appropriate opportunities for independence. If the problem is feeling powerless, you can give them choices within your boundaries. If the problem is overwhelm, you can teach them calming strategies. You're not just managing behavior anymore, you're actually developing skills. And that's what creates lasting change. Remember, backtalk is not the enemy. It's information. It's your child's clumsy, unskilled way of telling you something important. And when you can decode that message, when you can understand what they're really trying to communicate underneath the attitude and the tone, you can finally address what's actually going on. That's when real change happens. That's when the backtalk decreases not because you've controlled it out of them, but because they've learned better ways to communicate what they need.